Hello, Professor Gosselin. I'm Mariana Baldivieso from your History 408 class, and this is my video commentary for my term paper. The topic that I chose was disarmament in Volume 3, Chapter 5 of the book. And it talks about U.S. foreign relations in the 1920s, specifically about the security aspect and disarmament, which is a topic that I'm really interested in. So one of the reasons why I chose to talk about this topic is because I took a Poly 260 course in my second year, and we learned about what security meant in the global sphere, and that for me goes hand in hand with disarmament. I really enjoyed this chapter of the book that I wrote about because as much as it centers on U.S. foreign relations at the time, it also talks about the position of other major powers in the 1920s, like Britain, Japan, Italy, Germany, of course, and the Soviet Union. And to be completely honest, I always had a lot of interest in the issues revolving around World War II, but I never felt like I completely was educated in what revolves around World War I and the aftermath. So it was very helpful to learn about the study of the Treaty of Versailles, the Washington Conference, the League of Nations, and Wilson's 14 points for my essay. And I'm also taking a course on British history, which mostly touches on the Industrial Revolution and the history of Britain until 1850. But I do believe that some of the issues that we touch on that course overlap with what we have discussed in this course. And I really liked looking at the relationship between Britain, the colonizer, and the United States, being the country that was colonized, and how both grew and became major powers, and how at one point the United States held the upper hand after the Treaty of Versailles and after all the countries in Europe were terribly affected by World War I. So my essay mainly argues that the United States' main goal in terms of foreign relations in the 1920s was highly focused on the issue of disarmament through the Washington Conference and other agreements. I talked about how during the Treaty of Versailles, Germany didn't have a lot of leeway and a lot of options. They just had to restrict their military. They had to restrict the amount of armament that they had, and the role that Germany played at Treaty of Versailles was very limited. And that's where the whole idea of disarmament came to be, and it stemmed from the outcome of World War I, which Germany had a sizable blame for. Yet the overall idea of disarmament could not have been achieved unless other nations, other than the United States, shared the same belief that there was a need to put an end to this naval race. But I did find very, very interesting that even after disarmament was talked about, the Washington Conference, the United States was still willing to pass, Wilson was still willing to pass this bill that would increase the naval capacity of the United States by 16 ships. So they would have 16 more ships than they would have before, and that would make them the most powerful navy in the world. And this was because they were very insecure about what other countries would do, especially Britain and Japan, how they would react and how they would behave, because I ultimately believe that the idea of disarmament was based on trying to establish peace and having goodwill around the globe, but it also meant that countries felt threatened, and that they were going to do whatever it took to arm themselves in order to prepare for a next great conflict, which is what happened in World War II. And the issue of disarmament kept going after World War II, which is what is also very, very interesting. It was also really cool for me to find out how important the impact of the public opinion was on an issue like this, because a lot of people were very educated, and there were a lot of peace activists that were vouching for disarmament. And I believe that the Washington Conference could not have been achieved without peace activists, without their input. So it's really interesting to see how much people can push their governments to act towards something. And yeah, those are basically the main points of my essay, and I'm going to let my essay talk to you about the rest of the content. And thank you for watching my video. I hope you have a good weekend.